The blood soaked through Zelda Bennett's torn dress as she lay crumpled in the dirt like a discarded doll, her breath coming in shallow gasps that kicked up tiny clouds of dust with each exhale. The outlaws who had robbed the stagecoach and shot her without a second thought were long gone, their laughter fading into the endless Montana prairie as they left her to bleed out under the merciless afternoon sun of 1878. Owen Kincaid had been tracking elk through the foothills near Montana City when he spotted the buzzards circling overhead, their lazy spirals drawing his attention to something wrong in the valley below. He urged his paint horse down the rocky slope, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle at his side, though he did not draw it. As he drew closer, he saw the overturned stagecoach, luggage scattered across the road like autumn leaves, and then he saw her. For a moment, he thought she was already gone. Her skin had taken on a pallor that spoke of significant blood loss, and she lay so still that only the faintest movement of her chest betrayed life still clinging to her frame. Owen dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground hard as he ran to her side, dropping to his knees beside her broken form. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was rough from days alone in the wilderness, but gentle as he touched her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, thready and weak, but present. Relief flooded through him even as he assessed the damage with a practiced eye. He had seen plenty of gunshot wounds during his years as a ranch hand and occasional deputy, and this one was bad. The bullet had entered her left shoulder, high enough that it might have missed the lung, but low enough that she had lost dangerous amounts of blood. He could leave her. It would be easier. He had supplies to gather, and Montana City was still half a day's ride. But as he looked at her face, dirt-streaked and pale, something in his chest tightened. She was young, probably not more than 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and now spread across the ground like spilled wine. Even in her current state, there was something striking about her features, something that spoke of determination and fire that refused to be fully extinguished. "I am not going to let you die alone out here," he murmured, already moving into action. He stripped off his jacket and pressed it against her shoulder, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. She moaned softly, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. "That is right. You fight. You keep fighting." Owen worked quickly, his hands steady despite the urgency thrumming through his veins. He pulled his canteen from his saddle and wet a cloth, wiping the worst of the dirt from her face and the wound. The bullet had gone clean through, which was both a blessing and a curse. Less risk of infection from lead poisoning, but 2 wounds to manage instead of 1. He tore strips from his spare shirt, fashioning bandages that he wrapped tightly around her shoulder and back, binding the wounds as securely as he could manage. All the while, he kept talking to her, his voice a steady anchor in what he imagined was her darkness. "My name is Owen Kincaid. I have got a cabin about 2 miles west of here, up in the pines where there is a good stream. It is not much, but it is clean and it is safe. I am going to take you there, and you are going to make it through this." He did not know if she could hear him, but he continued anyway. "You are too stubborn to die. I can see it in the set of your jaw, even now." Lifting her was a delicate operation. Owen slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, mindful of her wounded shoulder. She weighed less than he expected, and he realized she was probably half-starved beneath the layers of her traveling dress. He carried her to his horse, which stood patiently waiting, well-trained enough not to spook at the smell of blood. Getting her into the saddle while maintaining pressure on her wound required creativity. Owen mounted first, then carefully pulled her up to sit sideways across his lap, her head resting against his chest. He could feel each shallow breath she took, could feel the heat of fever already beginning to build in her body. Time was running short. The ride to his cabin seemed to take an eternity, though Owen pushed his horse as fast as he dared. Every jolt made him wince, knowing it must be causing her pain even in her unconscious state. He held her close, one arm wrapped securely around her waist while the other hand held the reins, guiding them through the familiar terrain. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when the cabin finally came into view, a sturdy structure of pine logs that Owen had built himself 3 years ago, when he decided he needed some distance from the noise and complications of town life. Smoke still rose lazily from the chimney where he had banked the morning fire before heading out, and the sight of it filled him with relief. He dismounted carefully, lifting Zelda down with the same gentle care he had shown throughout the journey. His arms ached from holding her, but he barely noticed as he kicked open the cabin door and carried her inside. The single room was sparse but clean, with a large bed in one corner, a table and chairs near the fireplace, and shelves lined with supplies and books. He laid her on the bed, grabbing every blanket he owned to pile over her trembling form. The fever was rising fast. Owen stoked the fire and set water to boil, then gathered his medical supplies. They were basic but sufficient. He had learned field medicine out of necessity, working on ranches where the nearest doctor might be days away. Clean cloths, whiskey for sterilization, needle and thread, herbs for infection and fever. It would have to be enough. He removed the makeshift bandages he had applied earlier, relieved to see that the bleeding had slowed significantly. The wounds needed to be cleaned thoroughly, stitched, and packed with poultices. It was going to hurt, even with her unconscious, and he hated the necessity of causing her more pain. "I am sorry," he whispered as he poured whiskey over the entry wound. Her body jerked and she cried out, a sound that cut through him like a knife. He worked as quickly as possible, cleaning both wounds with thorough efficiency before threading his needle. The stitches were small and neat, testament to years of practice on injured animals and the occasional cowhand. When he finished, he packed the wounds with a paste made from yarrow and golden seal, herbs his mother had taught him to use for their antiseptic properties, then bound everything with fresh bandages. The fever concerned him most. Zelda was burning up now, her skin flushed and hot to the touch. Owen prepared a tea from willow bark and got it cooling while he stripped away her ruined, blood-soaked dress, replacing it with one of his clean shirts that hung on her like a tent. There was nothing improper in his actions, only the clinical efficiency of someone trying to save a life, but he still felt the weight of the intimacy, the trust she could not give, but that he took upon himself to honor. He spent the next hour sponging her down with cool water, trying to bring the fever under control. When the tea was cool enough, he lifted her head and managed to get small sips past her lips, encouraged when her throat worked to swallow reflexively. All the while, he talked to her, his voice filling the quiet cabin with sound. "You are going to need to tell me your name when you wake up," he said, wringing out the cloth in the basin of water. "I cannot keep calling you madam if you are going to be staying here for a while. And you will be staying. That shoulder needs weeks to heal properly, and I am not about to let you undo all my fine stitching by moving around too soon." The night deepened outside, and Owen pulled a chair close to the bed, refusing to leave her side. He dozed intermittently, jerking awake at every sound she made, every shift in her breathing. Twice more he had to cool her with water when the fever spiked, and once he had to change the bandages when fresh blood seeped through. Dawn was painting the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold when Zelda's eyes finally fluttered open. Owen had just added wood to the fire and was turning back to check on her, when he saw her staring at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling with confused, pain-glazed eyes. "Easy," he said softly, moving to her side. "Do not try to move. You were shot and you lost a lot of blood." Her eyes shifted to him, and he saw awareness slowly returning to them along with fear. She tried to sit up, gasping at the pain that lanced through her shoulder. "I said easy," Owen repeated, gently pressing her back down. "You are safe here. The outlaws are gone. I found you on the road and brought you to my cabin to tend your wounds." "Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. "Owen Kincaid. I have a small ranch a few miles from here, though I spend most of my time up here in the cabin. And you are—" She closed her eyes for a moment, and he thought she might have passed out again, but then she spoke. "Zelda Bennett. Well, Miss Bennett, you are remarkably lucky to be alive. That bullet could have killed you easily." "Lucky," she repeated, and there was something bitter in her tone. "They killed the driver. They killed Mr. Henderson. They took everything and they shot me when I screamed." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, tracking down her temples into her hair. They laughed about it. Owen felt anger kindle in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "I am sorry you went through that. No one deserves such treatment. Can you tell me what you remember about them? Might be important for when I report this to the sheriff." "There were 4 of them, bandanas covering their faces. One of them had a gray horse with a white blaze. Another had a scar on his hand between his thumb and first finger. I saw it when he grabbed the strongbox." Her voice was getting stronger, though pain threaded through every word. "They talked about heading to the territories, said something about meeting others in Wyoming. That is good information, helps the law know where to look." Owen dipped a cloth in cool water and dabbed at her forehead. "Right now, though, your only job is to heal. You have got a long recovery ahead." "Where is this place? How far from Montana City?" "About 12 miles northwest up in the foothills. It is quiet here, peaceful. Good place to recover." Zelda's eyes widened slightly. "I cannot stay here. It would not be proper. You are a single man and I am unmarried. The scandal would ruin what little reputation I have left." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Owen felt a ghost of a smile tug at his lips. "Miss Bennett, you nearly died yesterday. I do not think propriety is going to kill you at this point. Besides, there is no one around for miles to care about propriety, and you are in no condition to be moved. The ride back to town would likely tear open those stitches, and then we would be right back where we started, except with you bleeding out again." She stared at him for a long moment, and he met her gaze steadily. Her eyes were green, he realized, a deep forest green flecked with gold, and they held an intelligence that suggested she was rapidly assessing both her situation and him. "You could have left me," she said quietly. "I could have," he agreed, "but I did not. And I am not going to let you die alone, not while there is breath in my body and fight left in yours." Something shifted in her expression, wariness giving way to cautious trust. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome. Now you need to eat something if you can manage it. I have got broth that has been simmering, and you need to keep your strength up." The next few days established a rhythm. Owen would wake with the dawn, check Zelda's wounds and change her bandages, prepare food, and try to get her to eat and drink. She slept more than she was awake, her body using all its resources to fight infection and heal. The fever came and went in waves, and during the worst of it, she was delirious, crying out names Owen did not recognize and fragments of memories that painted a picture of her life before. He learned that she had been traveling to Montana City to become a schoolteacher, that she had left Ohio after her father died, and her stepmother made it clear there was no place for her in the family anymore. She had taken what little money her father had left her and bought passage west, seeking a new start in a territory hungry for educated women willing to teach. "All my papers were in my trunk," she said one afternoon, her voice thick with frustration. She had been awake for longer periods now, though still weak. "My teaching certificate, my letters of recommendation, everything. Those outlaws probably burned them for kindling." "We will get you new papers," Owen assured her, spooning broth into a bowl. "Montana City has a telegraph office. We can wire back to Ohio for duplicates. With what money? They took everything I had." The despair in her voice cut at him. "We will figure it out," he said firmly. "One problem at a time. Right now, your problem is eating this entire bowl of broth without arguing with me." Despite herself, Zelda huffed a small laugh. "You are very bossy for someone who is supposed to be caring for an invalid." "Someone has to be, since the invalid in question seems determined to worry herself into a relapse." He held out the spoon. "Eat." She did, and Owen counted it as a victory. As Zelda grew stronger, she became more alert and observant. She watched Owen as he went about his daily tasks, maintaining the cabin, caring for his horse and the handful of chickens he kept, and always making sure she had what she needed. He was different from the men she had known back east. There was a quiet competence to everything he did, a self-sufficiency born of years of living alone. But there was also a gentleness in the way he handled her bandages, a care in how he helped her sit up to eat that spoke to something deeper. Owen, for his part, found himself increasingly aware of his guest in ways that had nothing to do with her injuries. When she was awake, the cabin felt warmer, more alive. She was curious about everything, asking him about the plants he used for medicine, the books on his shelves, his life before the cabin. He found himself telling her things he had not spoken of in years. His childhood on a ranch in Texas, how he had lost his parents to cholera when he was 17, the years of drifting from job to job until he landed in Montana territory and decided to put down roots. "Why here?" she asked one evening. She was sitting up in bed now, propped against pillows, looking much more like a living woman and less like a ghost. The bruising on her face had faded from purple to yellow-green, and her color had returned to something approaching healthy. "Why Montana?" Owen stirred the stew he was making, considering the question. "I suppose because it felt like a place where a man could breathe, space to think, room to be yourself without everyone in town knowing your business." He glanced at her. "Though I imagine that sounds lonely to someone who just traveled halfway across the country seeking community." "It sounds peaceful," Zelda said softly. "Back in Ohio, after my father died, I felt like I was suffocating. My stepmother wanted me married off to her brother, a man twice my age who looked at me like I was property to be acquired. Every day was a battle to maintain my own agency. Coming west felt like escape." "And then you nearly died on the road to your new life," Owen said, hearing the bitterness in his own voice. "That hardly seems fair." "No," she agreed, "but I did not die. You made sure of that." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Owen, why did you not leave me, truly? You could have ridden for help, let someone else deal with the complication. Why did you stay?" He set down the spoon and turned to face her fully. The firelight played across her features, and he felt something shift in his chest, something that had been building for days, but that he had refused to name. "Because when I saw you lying there in the dirt, barely breathing, all I could think was that you were not meant to die alone in the middle of nowhere. Nobody is meant to die like that. And once I started helping you, once I saw you fighting to stay alive, I knew I could not let go. Could not give up on you." The intensity in his voice surprised them both. Zelda stared at him, her green eyes wide, and Owen felt heat rise to his face. He turned back to the stew, suddenly needing to occupy his hands with something. "That was the best answer you could have given," Zelda said quietly. The weeks passed, and Zelda's recovery progressed steadily. She graduated from being confined to bed to taking short walks around the cabin, then to sitting outside in the sunshine while Owen worked. Her shoulders still pained her, and she would carry the scars for life, but the wounds were healing cleanly, with no sign of infection. As her body healed, the dynamic between them shifted. There were moments of easy companionship, like when Zelda insisted on teaching Owen to make proper biscuits, laughing at his clumsy attempts to fold the dough. There were moments of comfortable silence, when they would sit by the fire in the evenings, Owen reading aloud from one of his books while Zelda mended his shirts with her good hand. And there were moments charged with an awareness that neither quite knew how to name, when their hands would brush passing a cup of coffee, or when their eyes would meet across the room and hold for a beat too long. Owen knew he was in dangerous territory. Zelda was his guest, someone under his protection, and she had been through trauma that was still fresh. The last thing she needed was him complicating her recovery with feelings he had no business harboring. But knowing that did nothing to stop his heart from lifting when she smiled, or to prevent the way his pulse quickened when she said his name. Zelda was fighting her own battle. She had come west seeking independence, a life of her own making, and here she was dependent on a man she barely knew, living in his cabin, wearing his clothes, eating his food. It should have rankled, should have made her desperate to leave. Instead, she found herself dreading the day when she would be well enough to go to Montana City, when this strange interlude would end and she would have to face the world again. It was not just gratitude, though she was grateful beyond measure. It was the way Owen looked at her, like she was someone worth saving, worth caring for. It was the gentleness in his rough hands and the kindness in his stern face. It was the conversations that stretched long into the night, covering everything from philosophy to favorite foods. It was the feeling of safety she had when he was near, and the restlessness she felt the few times he had to ride out to check his traps or tend his small herd of cattle. "I should go to town soon," she said one morning, testing the words. They were sitting outside, watching the sun burn off the morning mist. "I need to contact the school board, explain what happened. They will have received word of the robbery by now. They probably think I am dead." "You probably should," Owen agreed, though his voice was flat. "But give it another week. Your shoulder is not quite ready for the ride yet." She knew he was right, but she also suspected he was stalling just as much as she was. "Owen, what happens after I go to town, after I get settled in a boarding house and start teaching?" He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the pine trees that surrounded the cabin. "I suppose things go back to how they were before. I come up here, tend my stock, hunt, keep to myself." "That sounds lonely." "It is what I am used to. That does not make it right." She hesitated, then pressed forward. "What if I did not want things to go back to how they were?" Owen turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "Zelda, you do not owe me anything. I did what any decent person would do." "This is not about owing," she said, feeling frustration kindle. "Owen, I have spent more time with you in the past month than I spent with most people in years back east, and I know you better than I knew people I have been acquainted with my entire life. You are kind and patient and strong, and when I think about teaching school in Montana City while you are up here alone in this cabin, it makes me sad." "What are you saying?" His voice was rough, guarded. "I am saying that I do not want this to end." The words came out in a rush. "I am saying that I wake up every morning glad to see you, that I look forward to our conversations and our quiet moments, and that the thought of not being here with you feels wrong." Owen stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the porch. "You have been through a trauma." Sometimes people feel connected to those who help them through terrible things, but those feelings fade when normal life resumes. You came west to teach, to make something of yourself. I will not be the reason you give that up. "You are not listening," Zelda said, rising to her feet despite the pull in her shoulder. She crossed to him, placing her hand on his arm. "I am not some fragile thing that does not know her own mind. Yes, I went through something terrible, but I am still myself and I know what I feel. When I look at you, I do not just see the man who saved my life. I see the man I want to know for years to come. The man I think I could love if he would give me the chance." Owen turned to face her, and the naked emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "I have been trying so hard not to feel this way," he said quietly. "Trying to be honorable, to give you space to heal without pressuring you. But Zelda, I started caring about you the moment I found you in that dirt, and every day since has only made it worse. Or better. I do not even know anymore. All I know is that the thought of you leaving tears me apart. Then ask me to stay. I cannot. You deserve more than a cabin in the woods and a man who has trouble stringing two words together in polite company." "You are stringing plenty of words together right now," she pointed out, a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of the moment. "And I do not care about polite company, I care about you. Your teaching position can wait. Or maybe I can teach children from the nearby ranches instead. We could figure something out." She stepped closer, looking up into his weathered face. "Owen, I have spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, living the life others planned. I came west to change that, to choose my own path. And I am choosing this. I am choosing you if you will have me." For a moment, he just stared at her, and she feared she had misjudged, that she had pushed too hard. Then his hand came up to cup her face with infinite gentleness, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I have never wanted anything more in my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you to be sure. Absolutely certain." "I am sure," she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her injuries but unable to hold back any longer. Zelda melted into him, her good arm wrapping around his neck, feeling like she had finally come home after years of wandering. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zelda Bennett. I think I have since the moment you opened those green eyes and looked at me like I was worth trusting." "I love you too," she replied. "And you are worth trusting. You are worth everything." They decided to wait a few more weeks before going to Montana City together, wanting Zelda to be fully healed before making the journey. During that time, they talked about everything: their future, their hopes, their fears. Owen admitted that he had money saved from years of working and careful living, enough to expand the cabin, or even build a small house closer to town if Zelda wanted. Zelda confessed that she still wanted to teach, that educating children was a calling she could not ignore, and Owen immediately began planning how they could make that work. "We could build a schoolroom," he suggested one night. "Not huge, but big enough for a dozen children or so. There are at least 5 families with school-age kids within riding distance. Their parents would probably be grateful for closer education than Montana City offers." "You would do that for me?" Zelda asked, touched beyond measure. "I would do anything for you," Owen said simply. "Your dreams do not have to die just because circumstances changed. We will find a way to make them work." When they finally did ride into Montana City, it caused quite a stir. The stagecoach robbery had been big news, and Zelda Bennett had been presumed dead along with the driver and Mr. Henderson. Seeing her alive, riding into town on Owen Kincaid's horse, wrapped in his coat, sparked immediate gossip and speculation. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Waverly, interviewed them both extensively about the robbery. Zelda's description of the outlaws was detailed enough to be useful, and Sheriff Waverly promised to send word to other territories to be on the lookout. He also arranged for Zelda to wire back to Ohio for replacement documents, though he warned it might take months to receive them. "In the meantime, Miss Bennett, what are your plans?" Sheriff Waverly asked, his sharp eyes moving between Zelda and Owen with obvious curiosity. "I am going to marry Owen Kincaid," Zelda said firmly, taking Owen's hand. "And then we are going to build a school for children in the foothills. I will teach there while Owen runs his ranch." The sheriff's eyebrows rose, but he nodded approvingly. "That is a fine plan. Montana Territory needs more teachers, and we need more men like Kincaid who know how to treat a lady properly." "When is the wedding?" "As soon as possible," Owen said. "I am not giving her time to reconsider." "I am not going to reconsider," Zelda said, squeezing his hand. "Not today, not ever." They were married 3 days later by the town's circuit preacher, a jovial man who was delighted to perform a wedding with such a dramatic backstory. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, curious to see the woman who had survived the infamous stagecoach robbery and won the heart of the reclusive Owen Kincaid. Zelda wore a simple blue dress bought with money Owen withdrew from his surprisingly substantial savings. She looked beautiful standing in the little church, her auburn hair gleaming in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, her face still bearing the fading marks of her ordeal, but glowing with happiness. Owen wore his best suit, brushed and pressed, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothing but unable to stop smiling as Zelda walked down the aisle toward him. When the preacher asked if he took this woman to be his lawfully wedded wife, his "I do" rang out clear and firm, brooking no doubt. "I do," Zelda echoed moments later, her voice equally strong, and when they kissed to seal their vows, the assembled townspeople erupted in applause. The celebration afterward was held at the town's hotel, with food and music and more well-wishes than either of them had expected. People who had never spoken to Owen before clapped him on the back and congratulated him. Women who had wondered if Zelda would be able to start fresh after her trauma embraced her and told her how brave she was. "You did well for yourself," Sheriff Waverly said, finding Owen at the punch table. "She is a strong woman. She will need to be living up in those foothills with you." "She is the strongest person I know," Owen agreed. "Stronger than me, certainly. Then you are a lucky man." "Luckier than I deserve," Owen said, watching Zelda across the room as she laughed at something the preacher's wife was saying. As if feeling his gaze, she turned and met his eyes, and the smile she gave him was radiant. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, a luxury that felt strange after weeks in the cabin. The room was nice, with a real bed and curtains and hot water for washing, but somehow it felt less like home than the rough cabin in the woods. "Are you happy?" Owen asked as they lay together in the darkness, Zelda curled against his side, her head on his chest. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," she murmured. "A few months ago I was on a stagecoach thinking my new life was about to begin. I had no idea how right I was, just not in any way I could have predicted. Do you ever regret it? That the outlaws did what they did, that everything changed?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret that people died. I regret that I was hurt. But do I regret meeting you, falling in love with you, ending up here? Never, not for a single moment." Owen tightened his arm around her. "I used to think I was happy alone in that cabin, content at least. But Zelda, you have shown me what happiness actually feels like. What it means to have someone to care for, someone who cares for me in return. I spent years just existing. You taught me how to live." "We taught each other," she said. You gave me safety when I had none. You gave me hope when I thought I had lost everything. You gave me love when I did not even know I was searching for it." They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, careful of her still healing shoulder, but unable to hold back the passion that had been building for weeks. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked until dawn about their future, making plans and dreaming aloud. The next morning they bought supplies in town and began the journey back to the cabin. But it was not just a cabin anymore. It was home. Their home. And over the next few months, it would become even more, true to his word. Owen began construction on a schoolroom adjacent to the cabin. He worked from dawn to dusk, felling trees and shaping logs, and Zelda helped as much as her shoulder would allow, bringing him water and food and encouragement. Neighbors from the surrounding ranches heard about the project and came to help, grateful that their children would have access to education without the long trip to Montana City. By autumn, the schoolroom was finished. It was simple but sturdy, with windows that let in plenty of light, a wood stove for heat, desks that Owen had built himself, and a blackboard that had been hauled all the way from town. Zelda stood in the center of the empty room the day before school was set to start, tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" Owen asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong," she said, wiping at her eyes. "Everything is so incredibly right. I am going to teach, Owen. I am going to educate children and give them opportunities they might not otherwise have. And I get to do it here with you in this life we have built together." "Our life together is just getting started," Owen said, pulling her close. "This is only the beginning." He was right. Zelda's school quickly became an essential part of the community. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science to students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. The children adored her, and the parents were effusive in their gratitude. She had found her calling, and it thrived in the most unexpected of places. Owen continued to work his ranch, expanding it slowly but steadily. He also took on occasional work as a deputy when Sheriff Waverly needed help, using his tracking skills to help find lost travelers or runaway livestock. The money they brought in together was modest but sufficient, and they wanted for nothing that truly mattered. A year after their wedding, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening after school had let out for the day, watching his face carefully as she spoke the words. "You are sure?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "The doctor in Montana City confirmed it. We are going to have a baby, Owen." He swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "A baby, our baby." "Zelda, I cannot believe it." "Believe it," she said, grinning. "Because in about 7 months there is going to be a very tiny person in this cabin demanding all our attention." "I am going to be a father," Owen said wonderingly. Then his expression shifted to concern. "Are you feeling all right? Should you be teaching? What about your shoulder?" "I am fine," Zelda assured him. "My shoulder healed well, and pregnancy is not an illness. I will teach as long as I am able, and then we will close the school for a few months while I recover. The parents understand." "I am going to take such good care of you," Owen promised. "Both of you." And he did. Owen was attentive to the point of being comical, hovering over Zelda and fretting about every little thing. She bore it with good humor, knowing it came from a place of love. As her belly grew, Owen would talk to their unborn child, telling stories and making promises about the life they would share. "I am going to teach you to ride," he said one night, his hand splayed across Zelda's rounded stomach, "and to track and to fish. And your mother is going to teach you to read and write and think. You are going to be smart and strong and kind, and you are going to know every day of your life that you are loved." "What if our child is a daughter?" Zelda asked. "Are you still going to teach her all those things?" "Especially if she is a daughter," Owen said firmly. "I want our children, boy or girl, to be able to take care of themselves, to be independent and capable. The world can be cruel, but if they are strong and smart, they will thrive." Their son was born on a warm spring evening, delivered with the help of a midwife from Montana City and one of their neighbor women. Owen paced outside the cabin for hours, nearly wearing a path in the dirt, until the midwife finally called him in to meet his child. Zelda was exhausted but glowing, propped up against pillows with a tiny bundle in her arms. "Owen, come meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the wrinkled red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving one tiny fist in the air. Something in Owen's chest cracked open, and he felt love of an intensity he had never experienced. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "Zelda, you are amazing. He is amazing. Would you like to hold him?" Owen took the baby with shaking hands, cradling his son against his chest. The infant's eyes opened briefly, dark and unfocused, and Owen felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. This tiny person was his to protect, to love, to guide. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "Welcome to the world. I am your father, and I promise you are going to have a good life, a happy life." They named him James after Owen's father, and from the start he was a contented baby. He had Zelda's green eyes and Owen's dark hair. And as he grew, it became clear he had inherited stubbornness from both parents in equal measure. Zelda returned to teaching when James was 3 months old, bringing him to the schoolroom in a cradle that Owen had made. The students were fascinated by the baby, and the older girls in particular took great delight in helping care for him during breaks. It was unconventional, but it worked for their family, and that was all that mattered. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Seasons passed, marked by the routines of ranching and teaching and raising their son. James took his first steps in the schoolroom to the applause of the students. He spoke his first word, "Da," looking right at Owen, who promptly teared up. He grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father around the ranch and sat quietly during his mother's lessons, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. When James was 3, Zelda became pregnant again. This time, Owen was less panicked and more prepared, though no less devoted to ensuring Zelda's comfort. Their daughter was born in the autumn, during harvest season, and they named her Ruth after Zelda's mother. Ruth was tiny and fierce from the start, with auburn hair like her mother and a temper to match. Where James had been easy, Ruth was demanding. She knew what she wanted and had no qualms about making her displeasure known when she did not get it. Owen adored her completely. "She is going to be a force of nature," he said one night, watching as Ruth shrieked with laughter while he bounced her on his knee, "just like her mother." "I was never that loud as a baby," Zelda protested. "No, but you are that determined, that unwilling to settle for less than you deserve. She gets that from you. And her stubbornness comes from you," Zelda pointed out. "Probably," Owen admitted with a grin. As the children grew, the cabin expanded to accommodate them. Owen added rooms and refinements, transforming the simple structure into a comfortable home. The schoolroom also grew, with more students enrolling each year as word spread about the quality of education being offered. Zelda hired an assistant teacher, a young woman named Sarah from Montana City, to help manage the increased student body. Life was not without challenges. There were harsh winters that tested their resilience, summers when drought threatened the ranch, and the constant work of maintaining both a school and a farm. But through it all, Owen and Zelda faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Zelda back to the spot where he had found her, where the stagecoach had been robbed and she had been left for dead. It was early summer, and wildflowers carpeted the valley, painting it in waves of color. "Why did you bring me here?" Zelda asked, though there was no anger in her voice, only curiosity. "Because this is where our life together began," Owen said. "This is the place where I found you, where I decided that I would not let you die alone. And I wanted to stand here with you now, 10 years later, and remember how far we have come." Zelda looked around at the peaceful valley, so different from the nightmarish scene she barely remembered. "We have come far," she agreed. "Sometimes I think about that day, about how close I came to dying. How different everything would be if you had not found me, if you had not cared enough to save me." "I think about it too," Owen admitted. "I think about how empty my life was before you, how I convinced myself that solitude was enough. Finding you did not just save your life, Zelda. It saved mine too." She turned to him, taking both his hands in hers. "We saved each other. That is what love does. It meets you where you are in your darkest moment and refuses to let you face it alone." "I will never let you face anything alone," Owen vowed. "Not as long as I draw breath. And I will never let you go back to that lonely cabin in the woods, isolated and convinced that is all you deserve," Zelda replied. "You deserve love and family and happiness, and I am going to make sure you have those things every single day." They kissed there in the valley, surrounded by wildflowers, and it felt like a renewal of their vows. A promise that no matter what came, they would face it together. The years continued to unfold, bringing joy and sorrow in equal measure. They lost neighbors to sickness and accident, celebrated births and weddings, weathered economic downturns and political upheavals. Through it all, their love remained the constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the ranch and spent hours helping his father with the cattle and horses. Ruth became a voracious reader who had her mother's gift for teaching, and announced at 12 that she intended to become a doctor. Both children had been raised with the story of how their parents met, and they understood the value of compassion and courage. "Dad," James said one day when he was 16, helping Owen mend a fence, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you had ridden past that stagecoach? If you had not stopped to help Mom?" Owen paused in his work, considering the question seriously. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, "but not in a way where I wonder what if. More in a way where I am grateful that I made the right choice. Your mother is the best thing that ever happened to me, and you and your sister are the second best thing. I cannot imagine my life without any of you." "She says you saved her life." "She saved mine just as much," Owen said. "Maybe more. Love is not just about grand gestures, James. It is about showing up every day and choosing the person you love over and over again. It is about refusing to let them face the darkness alone." "Is that what you want me to look for? When I find someone to love, I want you to look for someone who makes you want to be better. Someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you anyway. Someone you would cross any distance for, someone you would refuse to give up on no matter how hard things got." Owen clapped his son on the shoulder. "When you find that person, hold on tight and do not let go." Ruth had her own conversations with Zelda about love and life, and finding one's path. She was fascinated by her mother's journey from Ohio to Montana Territory, from would-be teacher to wounded victim to wife and mother and educator. "Were you scared?" Ruth asked one afternoon, helping Zelda prepare lessons for the next school week. "When you were lying there after being shot, did you think you were going to die?" "I do not remember much of it," Zelda admitted. "There was pain and fear, and then there was your father's voice. He kept talking to me, telling me I was going to be all right, that he would not let me die alone. I think some part of me heard him and decided to fight. You were lucky he found you. I was. But luck is only part of it, Ruth. Your father made a choice to help me. He did not have to stop. He did not have to spend weeks nursing me back to health. He did not have to care. But he did. And that choice changed both our lives. Zelda looked at her daughter seriously. Never underestimate the power of choosing compassion, of choosing to help someone even when it is inconvenient or difficult. Those choices ripple out in ways we cannot always predict. I want to help people, Ruth said. That is why I want to be a doctor. I want to save lives like Dad saved yours. Then you will, Zelda said confidently. You have the determination and the intelligence to do whatever you set your mind to. I believe in you completely. As their children grew into adults and began forging their own paths, Owen and Zelda found themselves entering a new phase of life. The schoolroom remained vibrant with a new generation of students, but they also had more time for each other, for quiet mornings sipping coffee on the porch and long rides through the mountains. You ever miss Ohio? Owen asked one such morning. They were sitting together on the porch swing he had built years ago, watching the sun rise over the pine trees. No, Zelda said without hesitation. Ohio was where I came from, but this is where I belong. With you in this life we built together, I have never regretted a single moment of it. Not even when I am stubborn and ornery, especially not then, she said with a laugh. You would not be you if you were not a little stubborn, and I love you exactly as you are. I love you too, Owen said, pulling her close. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. You have given me everything, Zelda. A home, a family, a purpose. You have given me a life worth living. We gave those things to each other, she corrected gently. That is what partnership means. When James was 20, he married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, and Owen and Zelda gained a daughter-in-law who fit seamlessly into their family. A year later, their first grandchild was born, a baby girl who had Zelda's green eyes and James's quiet disposition. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Owen felt the same rush of love and protectiveness he had felt with his own children, and he marveled at how his capacity for love had only grown over the years. Ruth left for medical school in San Francisco at 18, determined to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. It was hard to see her go, but Owen and Zelda supported her completely, writing letters regularly and saving money to visit when they could. She wrote to them often, sharing stories of her studies and the challenges she faced as one of the few women in her program, and they responded with encouragement and pride. The ranch continued to thrive under James's capable management, as he and his wife took on more of the daily operations, allowing Owen to slow down a bit as age crept up on him. He was past 60 now, his hair more gray than dark, his movements a bit slower, but his mind remained sharp and his devotion to Zelda unwavering. Zelda, too, had aged gracefully. Her auburn hair now shot through with silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. She had handed over most of the teaching duties to younger instructors, but she still visited the school regularly, unable to completely let go of the work that had given her so much purpose. They were sitting on the porch one evening, as had become their habit, when Zelda said, "Owen, do you remember what you told me the day you found me? You said you would not let me die alone." "I remember," he said, his hand finding hers. "Every word of it." "You kept that promise," she said softly. "Not just that day, but every day since. You have been by my side through everything. You have never let me face anything alone." "That was easy," Owen said, "because you have done the same for me. We have faced everything together just like we promised." "I want you to know," Zelda continued, and there was something in her voice that made him turn to look at her fully. That whatever comes, however our story ends, I have loved every moment of this life with you. I have no regrets, only gratitude. Zelda, why are you talking like this? Concern sharpened his voice. I am not trying to worry you, she assured him. I am just thinking about how blessed we have been, how we took something terrible and turned it into something beautiful. We have had decades together, Owen. We have raised wonderful children, built a community, loved each other well. That is more than most people ever get. It is not enough, he said roughly. I want decades more. I want to grow so old together that we can barely remember what it was like to be young. Then we will, she said, squeezing his hand. We will have all the time we need because we have right now, and that is all that matters. And they did have time. Years more of it, in fact, filled with the everyday joys and sorrows of life. They watched James's family grow to include 3 children. They celebrated when Ruth returned from San Francisco as Dr. Ruth Kincaid and opened a practice in Montana City, becoming the first female doctor in the territory and a source of immense pride. They marked anniversaries and birthdays, welcomed new neighbors, and said goodbye to old friends. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children organized a party that brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by Owen and Zelda Kincaid. Former students, now grown with children of their own, came to share stories of how Mrs. Kincaid had inspired them. Neighbors spoke of Owen's quiet generosity, how he could always be counted on in times of trouble. Their children and grandchildren filled the expanded cabin with laughter and love. Standing in the middle of it all, Zelda's hand in his, Owen felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was the life he had never known he was missing, the family he had never imagined having. And it had all started because he chose to stop that day, chose to help a dying woman in the dirt, chose to refuse to let her die alone. "What are you thinking about?" Zelda asked, reading his expression as she always could. "I am thinking about how one decision changed everything," he said. "How choosing to help you that day was the best choice I ever made." "It was meant to be," Zelda said, "all of it. The terrible things that brought us together and the beautiful things that came after. We were always meant to find each other." "I believe that," Owen said. "I believe we were." As the party continued around them, they slipped away to their favorite spot, the porch swing where they had spent countless hours over the decades. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and everything was peaceful. "I love you, Owen Kincaid," Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I have loved you since the moment I opened my eyes and saw you looking at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving." "You were worth saving," Owen said fiercely. "You were worth everything. And I have loved you just as long. When you were lying there barely breathing and I saw the fight in you, the refusal to give up even when everything was against you, I knew you were someone special, someone worth fighting for." "We fought for each other," Zelda said, "and we won. Look at this life we have built. Look at all the love surrounding us. We won, Owen." "We did," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "We absolutely did." They sat there together as the sun set, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, comfortable in the silence that came from decades of knowing each other completely. Inside the cabin, their family continued to celebrate, the sound of music and laughter drifting out to where they sat. This was what happiness looked like, Owen thought. Not the absence of hardship or pain, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. It was choosing each other every single day. It was building something together that would outlast them both, a legacy of kindness and compassion and courage. "Thank you," Zelda whispered. "For what? For stopping that day. For refusing to let me die alone. For giving me this life." "Thank you for fighting," Owen replied. "For choosing to live, for loving me back." Always, she promised. For all the years we have left, I will always love you. Always, Owen echoed, and it was both a promise and a prayer, a vow that transcended time. They grew old together, just as Owen had wanted, their hair white and their bodies slower, but their love as strong as ever. They watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren into the world, each new generation a testament to the choice Owen had made that day so long ago to stop and help someone in need. When the time came for them to leave this world, they left behind a legacy that extended far beyond their immediate family. The school that Zelda had started still stood, educating children throughout the region. The values they had lived by, compassion and courage and choosing each other every day, had been passed down through their children and would continue through the generations to come. But more than any tangible legacy, they left behind a love story. The story of a cowboy who refused to let a dying woman face death alone, and the woman who fought to stay alive and ended up giving that cowboy a reason to truly live. It was a story told and retold by their descendants, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, choosing compassion could change everything. Owen and Zelda Kincaid lived their lives together for over 50 years, and they died within days of each other, neither able to bear being without the other for long. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the cabin where they had built their life together, under a sky as wide and endless as the love they had shared. Their story became legend in Montana territory, passed down as an example of what true love looked like. Not the easy romance of storybooks, but the harder, truer love that was built day by day through choice and commitment. The love that began in tragedy and transformed it into something beautiful. The love that refused to give up, that chose life and hope in each other, over and over again. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the school or the ranch or the children and grandchildren, important as those were, but the example of what it meant to love someone completely, to choose them in their darkest hour and every hour after. To refuse to let them face anything alone. To build a life together that honored both the terrible beginning and the beautiful journey that followed. The Outlaws had left Zelda Bennett for dead in the Montana dirt that terrible day in 1878. Owen Kincaid had found her breathing and refused to let her die alone. And from that single choice, made in a moment of compassion, had come a lifetime of love, a family that would span generations, and a story that would be remembered long after they were gone. It was proof that even in the wild and often brutal landscape of the American West, love could not only survive but thrive, transforming tragedy into triumph and strangers into soulmates bound together for eternity.